Next News. Breaking news.
For years, the regime media told you the COVID lab leak theory was fringe, irresponsible, maybe even dangerous to discuss. Then it became possible. Then it became one theory among many. But now under President Trump, the story is moving somewhere the establishment never wanted to go. Declassification. Not another cable news shouting match, not another expert panel. Actual records. DNI Tulsi Gabbard is expected to release declassified intelligence on COVID origins right as her office drops new evidence about U.S.-funded biolabs overseas, and whistleblowers say key findings were buried. The question is no longer what we were allowed to believe. The question is, what do the documents show? And that's why this matters so much. The biggest development here is not one personality or a soundbite, not even an agency leak. Is that the Trump administration appears determined to drag the COVID origin fight out of the fog of spin and into the sunlight of documentary evidence. And that changes everything. Because for years, Americans were pushed to treat this as a debate over opinions, conspiracy theory versus approved narrative. But once records are declassified, the debate becomes about actions, decisions, and accountability. Who funded what? Which labs handled dangerous pathogens? And what did intelligence analysts conclude? What was softened, buried, or withheld from Congress and the public? See, Gabbard has already released material pointing to past U.S. government funding for more than 120 biolabs in over 30 countries, including Ukraine, while supporting President Trump's order to end federal funding for dangerous gain-of-function research worldwide. That means the conversation is no longer just about Wuhan. It's about a much bigger biosafety system and whether the American people were deliberately kept in the dark about risks that they were forced to live with. And while we're talking about systems built to confuse the public, there's another one hitting millions of American families right in the wallet. So pay attention to this, because if you or someone in your family is on Medicare, this directly affects your wallet. Medicare is confusing by design. The mailers, the robocalls, the fine print, the commercials, it's all built to keep you overwhelmed, so you pick a plan and never look at it again. That's the Medicare confusion industrial complex, and seniors are paying for it without even knowing it. Chapter is simple by design. One call, one advisor. They look at your doctors, your prescriptions, and your needs, then help you compare plans that actually fit. Some people save real money, in some cases as much as $1,100 a year. So call the number you see on your screen. Call Chapter at 910-728-4109 and get help from someone who works for you. Now back to a story where Americans are also demanding clear answers instead of managed confusion. See, here's the twist. The corporate press still doesn't want to say out loud, this is no longer just about where COVID started. It's about whether parts of the intelligence and public health bureaucracy shaped the story before the facts were fully on the table. A whistleblower has testified that CIA analysts concluded a lab leak was the most likely origin and that those findings were buried, softened, or withheld. Senator Rand Paul says documents and sworn testimony tell a very different story than what the public was fed. And if that's true, this becomes an oversight fight, not just an origins fight. So we have this from the Washington Times. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in coming days is expected to release declassified intelligence documents on the origins of COVID-19, a disclosure that comes after years of disputed and controversial assessments on whether the pandemic originated in a Chinese lab or came from a wild animal. And remember, during COVID, you couldn't even post about that online. You would be canceled immediately, your accounts terminated, and you would never be allowed on social media again. So the conspiracy theorists were, of course, right again. So the Washington Times reports the headline, the fight's moving out of theory and into declassified records. Now Tulsi Gabbard goes on camera herself, releasing intelligence on more than 120 biolabs, warning the public was kept in the dark. She says this, today I'm releasing never-before-seen intelligence revealing new evidence of past U.S. government funding for more than 120 biolabs in support of President Trump's executive order. Here she is.
After months of searching through intelligence community holdings and files, today I'm releasing new evidence of long-standing U.S. government funding of more than 120 biolabs in over 30 countries. Now, these biolabs include labs in places like Ukraine, which could be at risk of compromise due to the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war. In fact, the intelligence community had previously warned that a U.S.-funded biolab in Ukraine likely housed dangerous pathogens and remained vulnerable to longstanding threats of Russian attack, seizure, or damage. Now, until now, evidence regarding the full existence and funding of these laboratories had been knowingly withheld from you, the American people. Many of these U.S. government-funded biolabs are currently or have previously engaged in research using hazardous and highly contagious pathogens, and in some cases included dangerous gain-of-function research with very little visibility or oversight. Now, President Trump clearly understands the serious threat dangerous gain-of-function research poses to the American people. And this is why he took decisive action over a year ago. On May 25th, 2025, he signed an executive order to end federal funding of gain-of-function research around the world. Here at ODNI, I issued new guidance to the intelligence community directing increased collection on these laboratories and facilities overseas. And we're already seeing the results of this increased collection. We're learning new details, for example, on clinical trials that are underway at these facilities and that are raising significant ethical, financial, and security concerns regarding the supposed public health initiatives and U.S. national security. Now, despite the obvious potential for catastrophic global impact that research on dangerous pathogens in biolabs can have, politicians and so-called health professionals like Dr. Fauci, as well as entities within the Biden administration's national security team, lied repeatedly to the American people about the existence of U.S.-funded and supported biolabs. Not only did they lie, they threatened those who attempted to expose the truth. So this release today breaks new ground, as the information surrounding the existence, history, locations, and funding of these U.S.-funded biolabs has been intentionally covered up by very powerful people who falsely claimed that these biolabs didn't exist. Now, they accuse anyone who says otherwise to be foreign assets and traitors to America. Now, ODNI will continue working closely with partners across the U.S. government to identify exactly where these labs are and what pathogens they contain to end dangerous gain-of-function research that threatens the health and well-being of the American people and people around the world.
Now, if we could only arrest Fauci, right? So she widened this from Wuhan to a much bigger biolab gain-of-function accountability. Next, CIA whistleblower claims her declassification teams blocked, monitored, and stripped of files while digging into the COVID origins cover-up.
The CIA refused to provide information necessary to understand why analytical standards at the CIA were violated. The CIA illegally monitored the computer and phone usage of DIG personnel, their investigations, and contact with whistleblowers. These were Americans being spied upon illegally while executing duties directed by the president and under the authority of the Director of National Intelligence. One CIA contractor assisting with the DIG's investigation into the events that transpired between 2022 and 2023 was fired by the CIA one day after meeting with the DIG. When the DIG ceased operations, the CIA also took back 40 boxes of JFK files and MKUltra files being processed for declassification by Tulsi Gabbard.
So, if the whistleblower's right, this wasn't just bureaucratic foot-dragging, it was the intel machine protecting itself. Now, new clip lays out the case that the lab leak story was buried on purpose and Fauci's role was front and center.
Fox News alert, Anthony Fauci's in big trouble. The little man in a lab coat got a lot wrong and never fessed up to any of it. 2 weeks to slow the spread, wear a mask, and whatever you do, don't say lab leak. Well, today, a CIA whistleblower told the Senate the deep state is still covering up where COVID came from, and Fauci helped them do it.
Intelligence community leaders and senior analysts downplayed the possibility that the COVID pandemic originated as a result of a lab incident. Dr. Fauci's role in the cover-up was intentional.
But the cover-up didn't start in 2020. It started in 2015 when Fauci had his own scientists change the rules so he could keep funding gain-of-function research, the kind that was happening in Wuhan. Fast forward 4 years, October 2019, the CDC, Johnson & Johnson, and the former number 2 at the CIA teamed up with Bill Gates' foundation and the World Economic Forum to war game a fake coronavirus pandemic.
And of course, when we reported on all that at the time, we were heavily censored, videos were deleted, and it was absolute censorship. So that ties the cover up directly to Fauci and the intelligence apparatus. Next, Rand Paul brings it into black and white, saying Fauci used deep connections inside the intel community to steer away from the Wuhan lab. He posted this. Today we have further proof that Fauci had deep connections to the intel agencies when COVID came out. He leveraged those connections to steer the intelligence community away from the idea that the lab leak took place at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. We now know the lab leak is likely what occurred. And he posts to this Washington Examiner article. And I remember specifically when we reported about how they had taken the gain-of-function research from Fort Detrick and moved it to Wuhan. We were called conspiracy theorists. We were smeared, and our videos were deleted from the internet. And now, of course, it's all true. So Paul says Fauci didn't just get it wrong. He worked the system to shape the connection. Now he turns to the bigger fight, public oversight, declassification, why the American people still have not seen the full record. Okay, not sure where the audio is on that. But his point is simple. Closed-door testimony protects the swamp. Public testimony exposes it next to the hearing room, backs it up with a whistleblower. The CIA analysts reached a lab leak conclusion. Those findings were buried or withheld. Here's more from Senator Rand Paul.
Concur, and I would also like to respond to the CIA spokesman. They say that we have already obtained closed-door testimony. Well, closed-door testimony doesn't provide oversight. Public testimony provides oversight. We have asked them for public testimony and for oversight. We would love to have the scientists, the 6 or 7 scientists that were commissioned to look at this, we'd love to see their report. Why would we not be allowed to see their report? I can't even read that in private. But that should be public, the science. If there are sources and methods, mark them out, redact them. But we should be able to see that. But for them to have the gall to say, oh, we allowed the witness to testify in private and that should be enough. No, you were told by Congress unanimously to declassify this material and you send us 5 pages. Imagine how many, you mentioned maybe 2,000 pages. DOE has a report. That's got to be 40 or 50 pages, but the base documents for DOE's report are probably run into the hundreds of pages just for that one report. And they did a great analysis of this, but still most of that is not available to the public. Why?
So the pattern that we just heard, one story public, another inside government, keeps getting harder to ignore. Next, declassification OD&I material puts real documents on the screen detailing U.S.-backed labs in Ukraine and the pathogens they handled. Is this what they had planned for us? Newly declassified, America built and funded over 40 labs in Ukraine, stored dangerous Soviet-era pathogens in complete secret. States the U.S. built and supported more than 40 labs across Ukraine, and held especially dangerous pathogens as anthrax, Ebola, Marburg plague, Lassa, MERS, SARS, tularemia, tuberculosis, and others. U.S. scientists trained Ukrainian staff to work with these high-risk pathogens. Many labs operated at high biosafety levels, which were used for the most dangerous diseases. A map in the document shows lab locations across Ukraine. The report gives specific examples of U.S.-funded labs with exact costs, some costing over $3 million each. It names the main U.S. contractor, Black & Veatch, along with Ukrainian partners. Several labs received official permits to work with especially dangerous pathogen. And this document confirms the U.S. directly built and paid for dozens of labs in Ukraine, storing some of the world's most dangerous pathogens with millions of taxpayer dollars in complete secrecy. So some of the documents you can see now being released and approved. So there's even more. The OD&I slides are why the story is getting bigger by the day. Not just what happened, but what was hidden. Meanwhile, the personal fight at the top of the intel world is heating up, with Fox reporting Trump is nominating Jay Clayton for D&I after some pushback on Capitol Hill.
Mark Meredith has got the breaking news from the White House. Clayton, quite a well-known fellow. Absolutely, especially around here in Washington, John. Of course, the headline here is that the president felt the pressure that was coming from Capitol Hill, including from a number of Republicans that were not happy to see Bill Pulte in the Director of National Intelligence position. He was named as acting DNI. What this does is set up the nomination for, as you mentioned, Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District in New York. He was also the chairman of the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, during the president's first term. I think it was 2017 to 20. He is well known around Washington, obviously in the legal circles. Also had served, I believe, on the board of American Express. The question, of course, here is, will this propel Congress to move quickly on this nomination? Tulsi Gabbard, who had been confirmed for this job, obviously was going to be replaced, and she had announced that she would be leaving, the president going in a different direction, and she was expected to leave by the end of this month. Axios came out with a report today which said that Pulte had called her and said, nope, you're done this week. It's time to get moving. And it's unclear whether or not that leaking may have had any impact on the president's decision. But perhaps that's the biggest headline today, was that there was a number of congressional Republicans, in addition to Democrats, who blocked an extension, a short-term extension of a warrantless surveillance act that needed to be approved by Congress because there was so much anger over Pulte's nomination for DNI. So it's unclear right now, is he going to stay as acting DNI as this nomination works through? It's an important post. It's been around for decades. The question, of course, here is, what will this do to change any of the feelings up on the Hill? I just checked with our Capitol Hill team. A lot of these lawmakers, they're already heading to the airport. It's hotter than hell out here, John. They're already skipping town for the weekend. So any movement would likely have to come after this weekend.
So this is the real turning point. See, the Trump administration is not simply revisiting an old controversy. It's building an evidentiary record. Gabbard's release on foreign biolabs, gain-of-function concerns, and hidden funding streams widens the frame from one lab in Wuhan to a global system of dangerous research with weak visibility and weak accountability. Add in whistleblower claims that Congress was not fully informed, and investigators themselves were obstructed, and the center of gravity changes fast. The battle's no longer which theory do you like. The battle is, what did officials know, what did they hide, and why? And that is where institutions lose credibility, and that's exactly why declassification matters. Documents can outlast narratives, and records can expose people who thought they would never be challenged. So let's be clear about what we're watching. President Trump's team is taking one of the most heavily managed stories out of the last decade and forcing it into the realm of records, oversight, and accountability. And that's a win for truth, a win for transparency, and a win for every American who is smeared for asking obvious questions. Tulsi Gabbard's document release matters because they open a door to a larger reckoning over biolabs, pathogen research, gain-of-function funding, and the people who decided what you were allowed to know. If more files are coming in the days ahead, this story could move from suspicion to proof very quickly. And if that happens, a whole lot of the old gatekeepers are going to be exposed. So share this video, subscribe to Next News, and drop your comment below. Yes or no, do you believe the full COVID origin record should be declassified for the American people immediately? Let's have a conversation, because it's about time. It's about time you text raw feed to 844-840-4963. We're cutting out the middleman, going direct to you to bring you the truth and news that you depend on. And we're celebrating America 250 here at Next News. Are you? Why don't you go ahead and check out the merch shelf below this video, or just visit shop.nextnewsnetwork.com.
The system controls information. Information control is power.
They don't want you to see this.
The truth only survives together. They don't want this. Share this now.